Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getItinwriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
My guest is John Bermuda Schwartz. He is a musician, graphic artist, all-around dweeb, I guess. I don't know, you seem to be pretty involved in a lot of different stuff. Best known for your longtime stint as a drummer for Weird Al Yancovic.
That's me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Your work goes back prior to Al, of course. So let's get a little bit of background on just where you came from before you ended up there.
Well, I came from a musical family. My father played accordion, of all things.
Of course he did.
Not professionally, but there was an accordion in the house. Now it's in my house, I should add. My mother played piano. She sang as a child, sang on the radio in Chicago. My brother originally played drums. So there was me, in the first few years, there was a set of drums in the house.
Ah.
And he switched to guitar, and I had actually started taking accordion lessons, and thankfully, I then switched to drums. The drums got moved into my room, and I took drum lessons. I had just turned 9, and this was 1965. So I was listening to the radio, listening to the Beatles, and listening to top 40 stations played Petula Clark and Tijuana Brass. They played all sorts of stuff. So I had a lot of rock and roll influences, a lot of studio musician influences like Hal Blaine, and I played along to records. I played along to the radio. I took lessons. And in high school, I was in the school bands, I was in marching bands, and eventually I started playing with musician friends that I knew, started getting gigs, did some demos around LA, a bunch of demo sessions with people. And none of that in particular led up to meeting Al, but I happened to meet Al in 1980, and that, of course, added a new level to my percussive pursuits.
No doubt.
And I've been working with him ever since. So at this point, it's over 43 years.
So musically speaking, before you met Al, obviously you glossed over the fact that you had come to LA and already started working with musicians. Where were your roots musically? Were they all over the place like that?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. Well, again, in listening to the radio, I didn't at that age differentiate between hearing a Motown song and hearing Tom Jones and then hearing Paul Revere and the Raiders.
Right.
And,
Right. None of us did. Yeah.
And in the 60s, then starting to hear Cream and a little more, edgy stuff.
FM radio.
FM radio kind of stuff. and it was just all music, and it kind of still all is. And I have preferences, but I mean, it's really all music because I hear something and of course I just focus in on the drums.
Sure.
And whether they're simple and driving and appropriate, or whether it's Frank Zappa or some of the prog bands where the drummers have a more expressive role in it, I enjoy it all.
Your style is pretty focused on framing the song. There are some drummers who I think are much more of a backbeat kind of a player, and I think you lean a little more towards the Ringo school of like playing to the vocal, playing to the melody.
Yeah, well, and Ringo was a big influence, and Hal Blaine, who did a lot of that, was a big influence.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, the thing, and drummers especially, so they don't start stepping rhythmically all over everything, really have to know what the vocals are in a song. If it's at all possible, you should hear a demo or be involved with the demo or go through some rehearsals and listen to the vocals so that you're not conflicting with them, or so that if there's a space and you absolutely need to do something, that's where it goes, and not to conflict rhythmically with what they're trying to sing, because they're singing melodically and rhythmically, and people have to understand the words, and the drummer can mess all that up pretty good.
It's true, and let's give this just one moment here.
They're coming to get me. Somebody says I played over a vocalist one time, so they're coming.
As a bass player, I'm very conscious of this too, where the drummer plays, because that influences, between the bass and the drums, we really do influence a lot more than just the groove. And I think that's, to me, that's always been the mark of a more musical drummer. There's always the joke about, a bunch of musicians and a drummer, but, the true musical drummers are those who do pay attention to how their part influences the whole ensemble.
Well, and I try to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and a lot of the music I play, because of the associations I have, my drumming doesn't require a whole lot more than 2 and 4, and I'm very happy doing that. I just like playing drums. I like hitting stuff and hearing music around me, you know, that works with it, and I'm happy doing that. And sometimes I get to play more complicated stuff, and that's fun as well. But I'm perfectly happy just playing this kind of stuff. I mean, one thing that being with Weird Al, especially as the 90s started creeping in, and Al's parody agenda started going after more highly produced, a lot of sequenced kind of stuff, a lot of programmed and sampled and sound created kind of stuff. I stuck with it. I mean, I got my first machine in 1985. I thought, you know, I'm going to, one way or the other, I'm going to be the drummer on this stuff.
That's right.
If I push a button,
and who
or I
better
hit
to
drums.
program a drum machine than a drummer?
Well, yes,
Yeah.
right. Because I've heard some really intricate programming kind of stuff, and it's like, you know, a drummer didn't do that. And it's cool, and it's inventive, and it's new, and I guess maybe it fits the song, but you know a drummer would never have
It's a
done
different
that.
instrument at that point,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I feel the same way about bass, in a sense that when you say 2 and 4, I think it's almost like a mantra. You know, you get into this groove, you get into this repetitious kind of groove, and you know, it's great to be able to just step out for 4 bars and do something, or do some little passing lick or whatever it is, usually in tandem with the drums, you know.
Yeah.
But then just go right back into holding down the bottom, because if bass and drums don't do that, you know, it takes away from the rest of it, I think.
Well, yeah, and I think whether simple or whether more complicated, a song should feel good, or it should make you feel good.
Yeah,
when you listen, or don't listen.
Yes.
And there are some things, you know, that I hear that I don't necessarily like the song, but I appreciate what went into it. And there's other things that can be musically very simple and very basic and don't require a lot of talent, I guess, or a lot of you know, technique to do, that just sound great and feel really good, you know, and that I enjoy listening to. And it's not, you know, I love that drum part because it's like really, he's really expressing himself. It's like, no, he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do. The bass is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The guitars and the rhythms and the keys are doing, they sit exactly right to make this song right, to make it feel good. And that's, I think that's the purpose. Whether it's going to be a simple song or complicated, it's got to feel right.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, we tend to be analytical because we're musicians, but you know, truth of the matter is, no layperson ever said, "Oh God, I love that snare."
Yeah,
you know,
they
love the
know
song.
if it feels good or not.
Yeah,
they you know, they just, you know, we hear it. I think it might be a handicap sometimes being a musician, because it is hard to just hear a song. Like I hear a song,
Yeah.
and I hear the drums.
We reverse engineer everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't mind doing that, but I mean, it's you know, I don't know how objective I can be as to whether a song is good. I know if I like it or not.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
but good is such a subjective thing.
It
and
is. And you know, for me, you know, I spent many years in the studio as a recording engineer, and so I'm immediately listening to stuff that, you know, my wife will say, "What are you listening to here?" You know, I like the song or I don't like the song, you know. But I think we tend to immediately start diving into those details because we tend to be analytical anyway. You know?
Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about this legendary fable that entails you and Al running into each other for the first time, because that's got to be a lot of weird serendipitous things all intertwined, I'm guessing.
There is quite a bit of it. There's well, when I was I'll begin at the beginning, and that sort of leads into the rest of it. You know, as kids growing up in the early 70s, a lot of us listened to the Dr. Demento show. And, you know, for a lot of at the time, in the very early 70s, when he first started out, he's really more of a musicologist. So he played a lot of just kind of rare and obscure stuff. It wasn't all about comedy. There was plenty of comedy in there, but it was about unusual and just different
quirky
things.
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah, quirky. And you know, listeners hadn't yet begun sending in stuff, and they didn't become the focus of the show as they would be later years. In the very beginning, we all just listened, and it just seemed like it was stuff you wouldn't hear on normal radio. You know, stuff you didn't have in your record collection.
Yep.
And you either liked it or you didn't, and people that liked it really liked it. So, you know, in being in school bands at the time, Dr. Demento ran a contest at one point. It was early 1973. And he ran a contest there was one song, Pico and Sepulveda, that was just constantly requested and was always the #1 song on the Funny Five. Just
Really?
constant, you know.
The intersection's not that funny.
Well, no, it's pretty ordinary. There was an Anna Walt Lumber there. Anyway, and so he held a contest. He says, you know, I want you to, this will be the Pico and Sepulveda Roll Your Own contest. Send in your version of the song, and we'll pick a winner. The winner gets a 78 RPM record of Pico and Sepulveda, and then the second place gets a couple of singles, and so he had some prizes he was giving out. So some friends, all of whom were fans of Dr. Demento, and all horn players. You know, you're in a school band at the time. There's not a guitar player and really not a keyboard player.
Of course.
So I just knew horn players, and I had them come in. A guy, God, I can't think of his name. Ugh, just getting old business, I'll tell you. Richard Elliott, sax player, well-known sax player. I went to school with him. He came in and played on our version of Pico and Sepulveda. A guy named Jeff Rona, who was a flute player then, became quite the keyboard player, composer.
Very talented film composer, yeah.
He was, and Jeff was there because I was in a band with him. My very first band was with Jeff Rona.
Really? Oh, I love it.
An interesting, him on flute, guy named Bill Turner on piano and drums. No bass.
Interesting.
Not initially. Anyway, in '73, he was there. Andrea Kay, who was a French horn player I went to school with, she came in and played on it. Trombone player named Gary Feldman, who became one of the top anesthesiologists here in Los Angeles. Wow. In fact, I don't even know if he works as much as he's just on the board now and just tells other people what to do. And another trombone player, I think, who I think wound up in the Tonight Show band. Anyway, it was sort of a very cool get-together of all of us in my bedroom in LA.
All high school students at that point,
yeah.
Right? Uh-huh.
And we recorded, did 8 or 9 takes, which I've still got all of them, on reel-to-reel tape. Did 8 or 9, anyway, so we sent it in, and we get to the night when he's going to play the winners and announce the winners. And he does the top 10. He'd gotten over 100 entries, and he played the top 10, and he's counting down, and we get to number 2, it's coming up on number 2, and he's getting ready to go into a commercial break, and I hear the very beginning of our recording, and then it cuts off. And then it goes to commercial, and he comes back, he says, well, for those of you that heard that little gaffe, you know what's coming up, this is number 2, and he said some very nice things about us. We came in second place, and we did an instrumental. We started out vocally, Pico and Sepulveda, and it comes in, and we just played it. We didn't sing over it. So that gave him the opportunity later to use that as the intro to his show, because he could then talk over it. So he used that for a while, which was pretty cool. Anyway, that led to some other recordings we sent. But mentioning that in particular, Weird Al was a fan of the Dr. Demento show. I don't think he was Weird Al yet at that time in 1973, but he and some friends also did a recording and sent it into that was the first thing he ever sent to Dr. Demento.
Was he number 1?
He was not number 1.
And, all right. So you already scored some points.
And I never got to hear it because it came out later. Dr. Demento said, well, I met Al. I was talking at his high school, and I met him, and he handed me a tape of his entry to the song, and to the contest, and I didn't have the heart to tell him he had missed the deadline. And I put it in my trunk, and I forgot, and I sold the car. So it's gone. Somebody's got that cassette.
Somebody's got a cassette and probably tossed it.
Or recorded over it. I mean, put some, Santana on it or something. So there's some serendipity there, because that was the very first for both of us that we tried to enter the Dr. Demento, and we got it. We got in there. And we thought, that's pretty cool. So a little while later, some of the rest of us got back together. We recorded another song and sent it in. And he played that, too. The Ballad of Woodsy Owl. And I sort of talked saying that. And then, over a year goes by, and we sent him another song called Mr. Ghost Goes to Town, which was sort of a mashup of 2 versions, 2 like 30s, 40s versions of the song. We sent that, and he'd played that. And that still gets played like on Halloween now and then, on a Halloween show. Anyway, that was my introduction to Dr. Demento. And this was like 1975 was the last thing I sent in. And I continued to listen to the show, and I was starting to play with some other people in town and do some other things. And moved out of the house shortly thereafter and started, playing with some other bands, doing demos and stuff. Well, my brother, who was in the Neil Diamond Band with Tom Hensley on keyboards, Tom was friends with Dr. Demento.
I know Tom.
Everybody knows Tom.
Of course.
And Tom had produced the band who did a bunch of stuff. They put out an album too, the Roto-Rooter Good Time Band.
Yeah, he played with, I believe my old friend Jack Conrad was in that band, bass player.
And so my brother and I got an invitation through him, through Dr. Demento, to come down and see the, hear the show, be at the show live on Sunday nights here in LA. So we came down and did that, and at that show, and that might have been in August of 1980, at that show, Dr. Demento asked if I would like to come back and do an interview, because at this point, 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, he was playing a lot of homemade music, including Weird Al. Weird Al had now come up and had become quite a popular artist on the show.
But this was prior to your playing with him.
Correct. And because I'd never even met Dr. Demento. So I met him in August, came back September 14th, 1980, and Weird Al was there that night. And I did an interview, and of course he knew I was a drummer, and I knew who Al was at the time. And he was going to debut a song live on the air that he had just written that weekend, called Another One Rides the Bus, parody of Queen's Another One Bites the Dust. And he had actually asked one of his other compadres in there if he wanted to play beat on the accordion case, while he did this live on the air. And the guy says, oh, I don't know. And I think it was that guy, that was Beefalo Bill Burke. I think he had asked if I wanted to do it, or possibly Al asked if I wanted to do it. I'm a little fuzzy because it was still, I wasn't writing things down yet that night, but I ended up doing it on the air live, and Dr. Demento rolled tape on that. And
so there's a recording of that
not just an air
somewhere.
check, and that became a single.
So that is the actual single?
That's the single of that night, and wound up on the first album, but it had been issued as a couple of singles, first by Al himself. And it got to be something because the Dr. Demento show was syndicated at the time, heard on almost 200 stations across the world, really. And stuff, the better stuff from the live show ended up in the syndicated show that started showing up at stations 2 to 3 weeks later, because that was a sort of a cobbled together, re-recorded version. But some of the things that, like a live recording of Weird Al was a pretty cool thing, and that wound up on the syndicated show, which usually got played on a Sunday night in major markets. And what happened was, and some of those stations where they had, the morning zoo guys would come in first thing the next morning, they would listen to the Dr. Demento show tapes at the time from the night before and see if there was any wacky stuff they could.
Yeah.
And so now Another One Rides the Bus is being played in morning drive time in major markets. And things this was not Al's first single, but it just went from there. My Bologna actually was about a year earlier, and that was on Capitol. And that was fine and novel and all that. I actually bought a copy at Tower Records before I knew Al, and had him sign it later, so that's worth $2 now.
Ooh.
Anyway, the song took off. I mean, now Al is getting a lot of exposure outside of the Dr. Demento arena.
Yeah.
And he calls me and says, that thing we did is getting played like on real radio now, to real audiences. And he was finishing up school at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and he would be back down in LA in January, and wanted to get together, record a few things, and put out an EP, which we did. And my brother was kind enough to play guitar on that. We recorded Happy Birthday.
Do you remember where you recorded all this?
When?
Where?
We recorded it in my brother's garage.
Oh, okay, so no like official recording studio.
No studio.
Oh, okay.
That was to be a little ways off. And we recorded that, and came out as an EP, 1,000 copies, very rare now.
So what year would this have been?
This was January of 1981.
Okay.
And shortly thereafter, TK Records, and I think it might have been the very last thing they put out, the disco label, somehow issued a single of Another One Rides the Bus as well.
The same recording?
Yeah. And I think Al had a manager at the time that had sold that to him or something. And
okay, yeah, there's some licensing questions in there that we probably can't address yet.
Yeah. And because it was sort of a surprise to Al when we showed up rehearsing for, and again, I should add early on that some of the early gigs we did were just accordion and drums. I was allowed to bring my drums. I didn't have to beat on his accordion case this time, but we brought that too. And at any rate, it evolved and turned into a real thing. And Al was pretty good about getting permission for things. And in seeking permission for a song called I Love Rocky Road, a parody of Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll, which she didn't write that song. One of the people that wrote it was a guy named Jake Hooker. He was in a band called the Arrows. And they had a version of that, which is arguably worse than Joan Jett's. Although possibly better than ours, I don't know. We had gone ahead and recorded, again with the accordion case and a bunch of his friends clapping, and we did that at my house that I was renting in Whittier, California. And we recorded that, and in seeking permission from Jake, Jake said, well, that's pretty good. You know, maybe we can, if you got a bunch of songs, maybe we can move ahead with this. And one of my clients, Rick Derringer, maybe we can get him to produce that. You know, we can get you some spec time somewhere and maybe turn this into something. And so Al's like, okay. And we did, and it did. And we went into Cherokee Studios in early 1982.
I worked at Cherokee in 86, 87,
Wow,
88.
we just missed you.
Uh-huh.
And we went in there, and
Which room? Do you remember?
I've got it. It was the smaller room. It wasn't
In the back.
Yeah. On next to the
Studio
parking
3.
lot.
Yes.
But we did go into the bigger room to do some overdubs later. But yeah, we cut 10 songs. Well, it wasn't 10 songs yet. It was like 9 songs. We already had another one, Rides the Bus, in the can. We recorded a version of Yoda, a parody of the Kinks' Lola, which did not get approved. And
Really?
So it is in the can somewhere, and that's one of the tracks that got away. That's one of 2 things in life that I do not have copies of that I would love to.
Ray Davies said no?
So somebody,
Ah.
anyway, but said yes
shame.
later, because we re-recorded it a few years later and put it out.
I thought I remembered hearing that it had, I thought I remembered hearing that song.
We did more of, the first album I said was, Al plays accordion. And that's part of the gag, is to do these rock and roll songs accordion style.
Right.
So the whole first album was pretty much done with a focus on the accordion and less of a focus on the production value of the parody that we were doing.
Yeah, he was like the wacky polka dude.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So all of these songs are very accordion based, and yeah, we pay a nod to the vibe of the song, but not too much to the production value, not too much to sounds.
Yeah.
At this point. And again, we went in there on spec. None of us got paid. Studio didn't get paid. Somebody made some money eventually, but not us. Anyway, we went in there
the
and
music
knocked out
industry?
like yeah, that's hard to believe,
I'm shocked.
especially back then.
Yeah.
When they didn't need bands. Anyway, so we cut 9 tracks in one night, and
It's a productive night.
yeah, it sounds like it. Unfortunately.
Well,
No,
if all you've got is accordion and drums, it's not all that tough.
well, we had added a bass player at this time,
Ooh.
who's still with us.
Ooh.
Steve
all right.
J on bass, came out from Florida and was brought in to record the album with us. And at the same time, we had and a guy he had been working with who played guitar. He was in a band with a guy named Jim West, and Jim was not quite there for those recordings, but he was there shortly thereafter. And Jim is still with us as well. Now, this is 1982.
Man.
Now, bands don't stay together
Yeah.
for that long with the same guys in them.
Even
you two did.
You two did. The Rolling Stones still have a couple of originals, but
since Brian Jones died, it's not the
it's
same.
not the same band. Yeah, agreed.
But certainly not. I mean, ZZ Top came close.
Yeah.
Or they were up there for a while, but they're not a Rush kinda. And I forgot the original drummer's name, but I still, even crediting Neil Peart, that they're out of the running. So it's us and U2 are the longest running bands who are still working with the original members. And our last album was a #1 album, so not too bad after that many years. So we recorded this album. Some of the songs got played on the Dr. Demento show. Al's new manager, who was also Dr. Demento's manager, Jay Levy, who was still Al's manager at this point, was shopping the tapes. And I think Rick Derringer was probably, putting some word out there. It was very cool. Me, Steve J on bass, and Rick Derringer on guitar.
So you really, cool you went from obscurity to
near obscurity very quickly.
Very quickly, yeah, yeah.
And the record deal was shopped, and every label said, someone's going to make $1 million, just not us. Except when he finally got to, and it was December of that year, got to Scotti Brothers, who were distributed by Epic, Portrait, and Associated, so CBS.
And they were always known to be a little bit out there. Scotti
Well,
Brothers label, they had a lot of interesting stuff.
Interesting stuff,
Yeah.
and a lot of, and I don't want to use the term has been, but I will.
Older stuff, archival.
Yeah,
Yeah, there we go.
legacy artists.
Yes,
like
there you go. I like that.
Petula Clark was on it. David Cassidy was on their label.
The Monkees, weren't they? No, that was
No,
Rhino.
but-
Sorry.
no,
Yeah.
But no, Rhino was cool. Rhino had a different
Rhino
vibe.
were the other oldies label,
Yeah,
so to speak.
and
yeah.
that was a cool deal, and that's where you go to get royalties.
Yep.
Because they sold well. Now, Scotty Brothers were more about promotion,
Yeah.
but they did have their label, and they signed Al. And at this point, they said, well, your single, such as it is a little old right now. Can you come up with, you've got, I think it was 8 songs, because the Yoda didn't get recorded. Actually, Another One Rides the Bus was going to be on there. So I think we had 10 or 11 songs on the album. They said we can use a couple of new songs, and that are more current. So we recorded an original, and the new parody, the more current parody, was a parody of Tony Basil's Mickey, which she also didn't write. I forgot the band that did that, and I
That was an older tune, though, yeah,
Yeah.
because that was when Tony Basil was also working with Tracy Ullman, and the
Oh,
two of
okay.
them had done. If you remember, Tracy Ullman did an album of oldies right around that time too.
Yeah, I think Tracy's hit at the time was "They Don't Know About Us."
Yes, and that was off that album, in fact.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
Tony Basil was her choreographer.
Oh, it's a tight knit.
Really, really, yeah.
So we recorded that Ricky being about the I Love Lucy show.
Yes, I remember that one. The video was
That,
lovely. Yes.
we went to a little house in Arleta, California, up in the valley, that somehow, and it didn't necessarily look like Ricky's. Well, maybe it looked like the Ricardo's apartment, but it was shot. It was video, and it was processed all in black and white
Yeah.
to resemble the show until the very ending sequence where it went to color, and there was a big dance scene. And Al shaved off his mustache, put on a sort of a pompadour wig, and became Ricky. Now, I should add that I always, since I was a teenager, I always shot photographs. I got into photography in the early 70s. I had a dark room at home.
Ooh.
I bought, a 100-foot roll of film and rolled my own canisters of film.
Damn, you were hardcore.
I was, yeah, I had the enlarger and the whole thing, developed prints at home.
That's
and-
why you were paying attention to the cameras here. Okay.
Well, and I don't shoot film anymore, but I always had a camera with me. I had a camera with me every time I was anywhere, except the very first night I met Al, although I do have photographs. Beefalo Bill was a photographer, and he eventually sent me like 40 years later, sent me photographs. Oh, you might like to see these. This is the night you met Al, and here's you guys rehearsing Another One Rides the Bus. I said, where were these when I was putting my book together?
You
And
had these, and didn't? Yeah.
So I have a bunch of pictures, and because I was only sparsely in the Ricky video. This was our first video. I shot a bunch of photographs. Well, I always shot a bunch of photographs, black and white, color, and I kept shooting film through like 2006. And these we'll probably get to it eventually, but these ended up in 2 photography books that I had published recently. So I've got, and when I say that he shaved off his mustache, I've got, and it never occurred to him, can I have a little privacy? I was in the bathroom with him, and he's lathered up, and he's shaving his mustache, and I'm clicking away. And it's not like, do you mind? It's like, what are you going to do with these photographs? Put out a book? So, you know what? That's not a bad idea. Anyway, we'll possibly get to the book later.
Yeah,
But
I want to talk about visuals, but I want to close this loop first on the whole recording thing, because this.
okay.
I mean.
I want to add one more thing about, we did our first video in '83, and I cannot overstate how important MTV was.
Oh,
At the
absolutely.
time. They were still pretty new, and they were playing videos. They were playing music videos like 24/7, which was a really interesting. Well, I missed that.
It's funny because really MTV was sort of a reshaping of the music industry at that particular time, because you had CDs coming out then too, and really that was, sort of, FM had sort of peaked and was, in its waning period, and MTV really juiced everything in that sense, and it really did. I have no doubt that MTV was hugely instrumental in Al's career. No
Absolutely, and because there wasn't anybody doing anything like that. So one, they're hungry for videos. 2, this was not, just the normal.
No, these were
mainstream
funny
stuff.
videos. Yeah,
and these were well
They had a
crafted.
plot.
These weren't performance videos. These were like there was a thing going on.
Yeah.
They were well done.
Uh-huh.
They were so MTV was hungry for that kind of stuff, and that played a huge part. I mean, that opened up Al, of course, way beyond the Dr. Demento audience.
So did you, as a visual person, have a lot of input into all that?
No, I no.
Really?
Not at all.
Because, I mean, I know, as you said, you're a photographer. I know you do a lot of graphics as well.
On those videos, this was all still pretty new to all of us, and even as creative and as much direction as Al had in his head about things, he left everything up to the pros. His manager started out as the director of these videos. Well, actually, we did hire some directors, but by the time Eat It came along, a year later, Jay Levy had become the director. So Jay was paying close attention. It's like, I can do that. I should do that. Right?
Interesting. Because, I mean, Eat It really is, the production value on that is insane.
Well, and part of that was, and I have photos of this, is Al and Jay looking at the TV monitor watching the Beat It video to make sure they could line up the shots and the movements and the camera movements for Eat It video. So they were paying very close attention to matching that video as much as possible. We even had the white gang leader in that video, Vincent Patterson, was in the Eat It video as well.
Ah, okay.
And just for a little authenticity there. But MTV was huge for that. As far as me saying, I think would it look better like that? That wasn't my place. It wasn't really even, Al started to learn to do that, and eventually it turned around. He became the director, and because he knew what he wanted, and he knew when he got it, and when it was like, and every time you shot film or whatever it was, you watch a playback, says that's it, next scene.
Well, and that's evolution with any artist. As they become more sure of themselves, they tend to play a bigger role in production, in pre-production. One would hope, anyway.
Yeah, and he was very good at it as well. It wasn't just that he wanted control or didn't want to pay some guy, extra person on set. He knew how to get what he wanted, whether he did it, and he can edit all that stuff, nowadays. I mean, he does all that himself.
Sure.
And he wanted, I mean, it's his thing, but he knew what he wanted, and it was easier than trying to explain to somebody. Yeah, and he would still storyboard it all out. I mean, he went through all the process, but it was him. And he really put together some very compelling, well-directed, well-acted,
yes,
funny,
yes,
and where we were trying to match something from an original video, a good match, a great match. He was able to get that and save time. He was able to knock stuff out like in less than a day, because he knew what he wanted, and he knew when he got it, and he didn't go, well, let's try it this way, or let's try. He said, no, I don't want it that way. We got what I wanted, and let's go to the next shot.
That actually was something I wanted to ask you about, because he really, he seems to be sort of savant-esque in the sense that he, a lot of it looks to be self-taught. And as a self-taught person myself, I recognize that in people. A lot of it seems to be not a formal background in something, so much as just, I think I know what I want, I watch a bunch of other stuff, I figured it out, and that really seems to be his MO.
Well, he paid attention. He was a very good student. He had some good teachers, and he was a good student, and the student becomes the master, and that's exactly what happened. And I'm surprised, and Al, don't do this, but I'm surprised that he hasn't entered into sound design more and just gone ahead and programmed all of these parody tracks himself.
There's still time, Al.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Because you still need me to go out on stage and wear the costume. So,
it's funny because I know that a certain aspect of this is self-deprecating on your part, but I am certain that, especially with a relationship that's this long, you two have had a lot of creative collaboration between you.
I know, and he tells us where it's our job to be creative musically, or when you walk through the scene, just be Bermuda or whatever. There's a certain amount that he doesn't, and I don't know if it's that he's throwing us a bone, or he thinks we know better than he does, or if he just doesn't want to be the director producer 100% of the time. But he knows, and we know, when it's our job to come up with something, and if he wants something specific, he certainly doesn't fail to let us know. And now when we're doing the parody songs, for example, we know exactly what we have to do, because we have the original song. Possibly there's an arrangement change, there may be a key change. In the old days, we used to speed things up a few beats a minute just to give some songs a little bit more energy, like radio stations still do that.
Yeah.
There was we'd never even rehearsed parodies. We don't rehearse them, the ones that have to be played, because we don't. What are we going to do? We just get together in the studio. We know our parts.
Play the song. Yeah.
We play the song.
Yeah.
We know
It's
the
like being in
tempo.
a cover band.
Yeah. You know, we know what it is. We know if it's going to fade out. We know we don't have to come up with an ending. We know the drill. And when we finish doing the rough track, it sounds, and we got much better on this over the years, but it really sounds like the original songs.
I mean, you do have some amazingly good players. You know, I
Well,
mean, really
yeah.
seriously, you
Well,
know,
thank you. Thank
as much of a joke as he may hold himself to be. I mean, musically, you guys are just super tight.
Well, Steve is a great bass player. Jim is a great bass player. We have all learned and grown. You know, when we started doing parodies that didn't have, you know, obviously didn't have live drums on them, I got into programming when those sounds were clearly not, you know, in the standard machines of the day, the Yamahas, the Rolands, the Korgs, the Lins, you know, when these were obviously, you know what, that's a sample that somehow got triggered in this, you know, I got into sampling. I got my first sampler in the very late 80s.
Did you get a Wendell?
No, I knew about those. No, you know what, I got, and it was already obsolete, but for drum sounds, I got the fabled Akai S900.
Of course you did.
And which had a whopping 328K of RAM. I could put a snare sound in there. It was great.
As long as you didn't try any cymbals, you were okay.
Oh no,
Yeah.
you couldn't. You know.
Yeah.
Well, again, the stuff I used on the sampler were percussion parts, short loops. We used to do a medley, and of course I took it on the road. We would do a medley where I literally loaded floppy diskettes, 3.5-inch diskettes, put in a diskette, loaded it in, took the diskette out, put the next one, and then pushed everything to where I could just press load and it would load the next one. I had to change, I used 5 diskettes during this medley that I had to change while I'm playing. Actually, the first one was I had to change these additional 4 diskettes while I'm playing the medley. It was just, you know, now of course.
One hand hitting the snare and one hand playing the floppy.
It was,
you know?
and this was before the days of us having like servers on the stage that 1 run the video and 2 run percussion tracks and things like that, and make my life and you know, a lot easier.
You're talking floppy disks. You know,
oh yeah.
Which, I mean, my daughter recently brought a floppy disk to a class of young children she was teaching for the day, and apparently one of them responded and said, "Hey, somebody 3D printed the save icon."
That's funny. That I wonder if anybody really knows what that is, or if they just say, "Well, that's what that is. That just means save."
Yeah,
if they know why.
We were talking about Cherokee. You know, during the time you were in there, we had some of the first NECAM automation in the mixed room, and it was NECAM 2, and it had those big floppies. You know, the
8-inch.
Yeah,
Yes, the
yeah.
floppy floppies.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, you know, the technology obviously has advanced, and you know, you've kept up with it pretty well, clearly. You know.
Well, you know, we and all of us, and Al as well. Al's quite an accomplished keyboard player, which is pretty cool since his left hand grew up playing buttons in a different configuration. He's learned to translate that to a left hand. And not to disparage our new keyboard player. I say new, he's been with us since '91.
Oh, he's a new guy.
He's the new guy, Ruben Valtierra, who's quite excellent. He's, you know, Al stumbled upon, with possible exception to me, but I learned, he stumbled upon the first time a great group of players that could meet his musical agenda. And we've all, you know, since I don't really have a melodic agenda per se, I mean, I can look at a staff and look at a note and I have to go, that's a treble clef, so let's see, F, A, C, C, D. That's a D on that next to the top line.
What's that old joke about, you know, how to get a guitar player to turn down? You put sheet music in front of them. Yeah.
Well, that's, well, fortunately, I learned to read and then eventually write out parts from the start back in the 60s. So I just, reading and writing has always been part, which is important when we're doing certain songs, and especially for parodies where it's got to be a specific part. But for the original songs, and again, for the parodies, as production values on hit songs out there was cutting edge stuff, we had to meet that. And maybe we were 5 years behind, but still we had to work to get there. Now on the original songs, and we were talking about creative input and stuff like that, we have, he will tell us you know, okay, this is going to be in the sort of in the style of a Weezer song.
Mm-hmm.
And here's my demo, and he would do a very basic kind of a keyboard demo, and we may or may not even have had lyrics with it. So the process on the original is he will do an Al demo, send that to all of us, usually on cassette 30 years ago.
Now just
email,
yeah,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we would listen to that, and you know, and he may or may not have put a simple drum track on there, or he would say, well, the part I played here, it's not. I you know, do a fill here, you'll know what to do, or do a fill here that sounds like this Weezer fill, or some other band. I want this particular rhythm on that fill, but the rest of it, you know what to do. In guitar solo, you'll know what to do, Jim, and stuff like that. And then other times he will want something very specific. So sometimes he's completely in charge, and other times we have a certain amount of freedom, not writing credit freedom, but in terms of
arrangement freedom.
You know, you know, but we're provided with the basic vibe, with the arrangement. And then we massage it, and then the band with Al goes in, and we record a demo. We record the band demo of it, and which gets us about 80-90% there. And then Al like listens to that. Okay, this is what the band is. Now I'm hearing it like with the band. I need this thing right here needs to be a little different, or this needs to be different.
Right.
And then so we massage it the rest of the way in our heads at home, or we practice it or whatever. Get together in the studio and run it down. With whatever changes. So there are 3 versions of most of the original songs.
It's pretty minimal.
Yeah, and very efficient. And I've got recording dates on everything that was done. I know when Al recorded most of his demos, and I look at them and say, well, Al recorded a demo here. We went in 10 days later and did it, and then we were in the studio 2 weeks later, recording 5 or 6 of the original songs.
So have you done a Weezer parody that I'm not aware of?
Not a parody, but we did it's called a pastiche or a style parody, meaning it sounds like a Weezer song, but I can't quite put it. It sounds a little bit like this one, but it's legally it's not, obviously, but it's a nod to that song. And the one Weezer thing we did was a song called Skipper Dan, and which is a beautiful, bittersweet, funny song about a guy working as a cruise boat captain at Disneyland, and telling all the bad jokes as they go. There's the backside of water, and all these things. And it's the whole song about that, and that he really wanted to be an actor.
Of course.
And just kind of lamenting, and it's a very beautiful. It could almost be a serious song if it didn't have so many funny lines in it. And it's a it's one of our favorites. And there's a video that goes along with us. And I spoke earlier about we use a server in concert, and not for every song, but every song that runs a video, and that's become part of the show. I'm on a track primarily to keep me with the video, but to stay with the video because there's also a certain amount of audio with it, and nothing is faked. There's just stuff on there that as 5 people on stage.
Sure, you're playing to it. Basically.
And with Al not playing a MIDI accordion and being able to make sound, there's 4 of us on stage that can only make so much noise. There's 1 guitar, 1 bass, 1 set of drums.
Yeah.
I can fit a background tambourine in there or something, or a cowbell or things like that. But there's sometimes percussion things going on. There's sometimes sound effects going on that we just, as 4 people, can't do it. And they're germane to the songs. If we don't do it, it's like, God, Al sounds like a bar band. What happened?
Yeah.
They used to sound so good.
Oh, of course. I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever it is, people use tracks these days.
Yeah, and it's okay. And I do not mind one bit playing to a track, because it's like I'm hearing...
You're still playing music together.
Yeah. Sometimes I get... And I usually program what I want to hear on the track, because Al knows I have to stick with it. And sometimes he hears the track, sometimes not. I mean, if I count something in, if it's not something that someone else starts, if I start it, I count it in, and everyone plays to me. Nobody hears the track but me. And the audience, but nobody else hears that click. So I'm allowed to make whatever click I want, and depending on the song, sometimes I'll put a drum beat in there because I like playing with other drummers.
Yeah,
it's a lot easier than playing to tick tock tock tock.
Oh, I've done productions where you stick a loop on the chorus to, lift it up a little bit more, stuff like that. Of course, that's using technology, and it's a little bit different. But now. I want to circle back to something you were talking about a moment ago, because your attention to detail is something that I find fascinating. You had mentioned like always carrying a camera with you. You had mentioned having all of these artifacts and memorabilia and everything. And you started it early enough on that I don't think you were thinking, oh, we're going to be famous 20, 30 years from now. It's just, you have sort of maybe obsession is not a kind word, and I don't mean it in an unkind way, but you have a real tight focus on really documenting things from a visual perspective as well. I mean, photography and everything. You really, you have kept such meticulous records about everything, and I think that's pretty fascinating.
Well, and that's come in handy, not just I'd like to see what I've done, but when Al needs to know something, I mean, he's finally, got all this information down now that I keep feeding it back to him over the years. But when they needed to know, they were putting out a compilation of videos, however, 20 years ago or whatever, and they needed to know, and I'm just the guy on set. Some of them I wasn't even in, but he knows that I had documented when we recorded them, where we recorded them, all of that stuff. I do the same for my sessions. I do the same for all the gigs I do. I write down who's on the gig. I write down if something happens. I've got a column in the database for whether there's a recording of it, and then that's archived, whether it's audio or video. Whatever it is, I've got all of that stuff down. I've got all the release dates down, catalog numbers, everything, for product around the world.
You would have been a great second engineer.
Well, possibly. And as far as, and that attention to detail, has translated into the drumming. It has translated into, and we all have it, and Al's got it in particular. We didn't learn it from him, and we didn't say, oh, we better, Al's a, very, very, not anal, very meticulous about stuff. We better step up. We were all that way. I was always that way. I always kept track of everything. I still have the visitor's card that let me into KMET radio on September 14th, 1980, because that's the night I met Al. I still have that, and it's pristine because it was stored, because I thought someday I'd want to look at this.
So clearly you don't move very often.
No, I can't. I got too much junk. I'm sorry, archive. I got a lot of archive. But all of that archival stuff that's just, I'd always been that way. I taped rehearsals. I mean, prior to meeting Al, and you're right. You mentioned, who knew 30 years down the line we had no idea at what point this would take off. We had no point if it ever got as big as it was going to get, or how long it would last. I mean, I think we're all surprised and pleased and grateful that 43 plus years later as a band, and Al goes back prior to that, but I mean, as far as in the public spotlight, as far as in the worldwide, let's say that started in 1983 with the first album. If you even count from then, that's over 40 years. That's 41 years. And to still be viable, doing what he does and doing what we do, we must be doing something right. And it's not just, well, your audience grew up with you.
No, it's a niche. You found the right niche.
And
absolutely.
We have young fans out there. The concerts, the tours have progressively grown and grown and grown. We haven't leveled off. We've yet to level off. I don't know what we do that would be considered leveled off until we start heading back down. And none of that's happened. We still grow. We're still growing, which is incredible, for anybody doing this as long as they have. It's just, but part of that is we're always sort of current. The parodies that we do are always current. Al is always known for doing something that in the mainstream is happening now, like, Al, this guy comes along and he's making fun of a bunch of 60s songs. And that's really niche. That would be niche. It's like, Al comes along and he's got a parody of the song that was popular 4 months ago. Oh, Al's put out another album now. He's got a song that was popular last month, and deserves to, and gets played all the time, and we see the video all the time on YouTube, and and it needs to be taken down a notch, and there's Al doing it or whatever it is. Actually, we don't make fun of too many songs.
You've never really made fun as much as just kind of
a couple. One.
Well,
Achy Breaky Song. One.
Oh, that one. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
And that was a real poke at that song, and Billy Ray Cyrus didn't much like the song. He says, Billy, you didn't write the song. We got permission from the writer, and it's already recorded and it's already been pressed. That's why you have a copy of it. And it's like, oh, well, okay. And that was a real poke. You don't play that song, that achy breaky song. And a whole bunch of, you can torture me with Donnie and Marie, et cetera, et cetera. But don't play that song, that achy breaky song. I just can't take it anymore. You know, and it was well done enough. I mean, it was a fun enough song. Anyway, that's the one song that comes to mind where he attacked the song, and I guess the artist. I'm sorry, another one comes to mind, but it wasn't released. But everyone knows it. It's a song. It was Billy Joel's song. It's still rock and roll to me.
Ah, the Laundry List song.
Yes. It's still Billy Joel to me. And this was a real poke at him. Every album that came out, he was just doing like the flavor of the month kind of thing. And it was about the New Wave album, the Glass Houses album. That song was written about him. Oh, here he is now doing New Wave. You know.
And you know, I mean, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but frankly, you know, Billy Joel used to write great songs years and years ago, and you know, like a lot of artists, you get comfortable, you get complacent, and sometimes you get a little lazy, you know. And
yeah, well, it's hard to keep up a certain, you know.
It is, which is why I think, you know, it's interesting that Al has this sort of niche that he can continue to go back to that well.
Well, and again, it's because everything we do is current.
Yeah.
And it's kind of within living memory. It's a now thing, and that's why we have, you look out in our audience, and it's a very wide demo.
Yeah.
Male, female, old, young. There's 6 and 8 year old kids out there. You know, a lot of our fans had met and they got married and had kids, and they're bringing their kids now, kids in their 20s and 30s, and so we have a lot of audience from way back, but we're attracting new audience. So our audience isn't like going away and dying off and getting bored and all that. It's being replenished because we're always kind of current. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. And what's interesting now, and honestly, we haven't had a new album in, it's 2014 was the last album. That was our #1 album on the Billboard
10 years
200.
ago.
It's not a comedy chart. I mean, that's a given. This is like the real stinking chart. Debuted at #1. That's a pretty big deal. And it was a great album. Mandatory fun. So we haven't really had any new product, and like a lot of bands that don't have, and that was our 14th album, so it's not like we don't have a catalog of stuff we can do on the road, but we would go out and we toured on that album, you know, as new product, and then in that was 2015 and 16. 2017 was a year off. We tour for 2 years, take a year off as a rule. We went back out in 2018, and because we didn't have any new product to speak of, and we didn't want to just do the same old show, Al took a different approach. And we went out and did sort of an unplugged tour, meaning no costumes, no videos, therefore no tracks, so no percussion, no fancy background vocals. Al got himself a MIDI accordion and programmed in piano sounds and string sounds and all sorts of stuff to complement what the keyboard player was also doing. So the 5 of us now are making music and playing these songs live.
Yeah, completely live.
For real. And further, we did only originals on the tour. We did a short medley of parodies at the end, and those were the versions were twisted, kind of like we did sort of a Latin version of Like a Surgeon and sort of a bluesy version of Eat It. Anyway, the whole show was comprised of original songs, a lot of which had never been played on tour before.
Was that well received?
Extremely, because a lot of the fans say we like the originals better than the parodies, and parodies are cutesy, and that song really deserved it. And you know, some of these other parodies were recorded obviously because you needed to fill up an album, but the originals really like sprang
brought out your real fans
from within,
yeah.
and musically for the band as well, a lot of them. So we rotated about 35 of Al's originals, and Al had to learn how to play some of these songs. He'd written them, but he never played them in the studio. So we had to rehearse. We rehearsed like 10 days. It was terrible. To learn all these songs.
Days.
Well, we've been doing this. Some of them we've been doing for a million years. And
I'm sure it was autopilot for you.
Some of it was, and some of it it's like, oh, we got to work up an ending for this song that on the album fades out.
Right.
We never had a live version before, so we did actually have to work that tour. And every night was a different set list. It was 77 shows, 77 different, unique. I mean, like terribly unique set lists. Very careful if we did 2 shows in one city to not repeat anything from the night before, because a lot of people would come back. So those people that went to 2 shows got to hear basically all of the songs that we do, sort of here a few there. They got to hear like all of them.
So did he just throw a set list at you before the show?
And well, we had those like well in advance of the tour.
Okay.
The entire tour was already.
All right, you already, okay.
Yeah,
so,
No, he knows, he plans very well ahead. And that that speaks well of the tour after that, which I'll get to in a quick sec. But one other thing we did, and this was a little bit of work, but a lot of fun. We played, as part of the encore, at every show we played a straight cover song. Al singing the real lyrics, us playing, as much as we could to, the original production and version of it, but only once. So we'd rehearse them. We'd rehearse the song the day before at the show to play the song the next night. At that show's sound check, we'd rehearse that night's show and the next night's show, et cetera, et cetera. So we'd leapfrog them a little bit. And we would do like Glad All Over by the Dave Clark Five, Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple, Girl You Want by Devo, Uncontrollable Urge by Devo. I don't know if we did Pump It Up by Elvis Costello, but we just, because both he and I supplied a lot of this is where I had some input. I gave him a list of a bunch of songs that would be like kind of good.
Great songs
that people would know. And it's not just for us, it's for the audience, because the audience doesn't ever hear us play anything straight or anything classic. So this was like, and every night was a different song. We learned 77 songs to play one time each.
Cool.
Which was great fun.
Very ambitious.
So, and that was what made that tour different, without having any new product to push. Now, the next tour was our orchestral tour, the strings attached tour. No strings attached, but strings attached. There was orchestra at every venue that we played.
Local orchestra every time?
Local, every time. We carried the conductor, because they had to know the show. And we had, that show was, we had an A and a B set list. We swapped out one song. But that was pretty much the same show. And we had a conductor, actually two conductors, a father and a son team. And one was always out with us. They knew the show. He was off to my left, looking at the orchestra in the back. I'm looking here, and sometimes we'd have to look at each other for a cue. But he learned who cued what song. Sometimes he cued the end. I mean, he had to know the show. But the orchestra is just reading music, so we didn't have to carry an orchestra. And we had some good work. We had the National Symphony at Wolf Trap. We had the Colorado Symphony at Red Rocks.
So we're talking 40, 50 piece orchestras
yes.
here. Yeah. Whoa.
I mean, the minimum we had was like 35. And
That's
most of the orchestras were really good. And they would rehearse the show during the day to a recording that we made early in the tour, so that we didn't have to run the whole show. It's a little rough on Al's voice.
Yeah.
And so the conductor, all he does is this. So it's like, but the younger kid, he was a drummer, so he sort of conducted that way. And he would watch me and I would watch him, and we were very much in sync. And I have recordings of most of those shows, and they sound great. And that tour, and again, that's what made the 2019 tour, the Strings Attached tour, different. And he had that concept when we played the Hollywood Bowl. We did 2 nights at the Hollywood Bowl in 2015 or 16. And we did a summer show, and the Hollywood Bowl was, they have their orchestra, and that's orchestra season. It's like, well, if you're coming into our venue, you're putting our orchestra out of work. You have to hire the orchestra. You send us the songs you're playing, and we'll write parts. You don't have to, but we're doing the show. You have to hire us because you're coming into our venue. So we at some point prior to those dates, they had sent a file of a guy playing the orchestrator, playing sort of the parts we could expect to hear, so we wouldn't be surprised. And we came in and it was, that's, and of course they're writing parts for songs that never had strings or horns on them, of course. Smells Like Nirvana, the Nirvana song. They created, they made up, and it worked. Somehow it worked. So Al immediately, and we rehearsed the whole show that afternoon with them, and it's like, wow.
We're doing this. We're going on tour with this, right?
And it was the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra, so a lot of major session people in there. And so Al gets it in his head, and we're not the first to have done it, but he says, this could work. Now, this is 2 years away still. We're already going to do a stripped down tour next time we go out, so I don't want to, but the next time we go out, I want to do an orchestral tour. And we did, and it was great. It worked out great. Very few issues as a result of having the orchestra on stage. We were always tight. It always worked. And we ran videos, and we did costumes, and we did the whole thing. And it was just, and as far as an opening act, they would do like 4 songs for, orchestral but up-tempo kind of things, like the Mission Impossible theme, and stuff like that. Yeah. So that was it. 2018, 2019 was our 2 years. 2020, prophetically, was a year off.
Indeed.
For us, anyway.
For everybody else, too.
And for everyone. I'm in several local bands. Nobody
did anything in 2020.
My last gig was March 10th, And by March 13th, which was Friday the 13th, everything was starting to hit the fan,
Yep.
and things were starting to slow down and shut down, and the airport closed up for, and then of course it took a while to come back. Anyway, we that didn't deter us yet, but we had talked about William Morris as the booking agency. They talked about booking a rather extensive tour in 2021. Thinking ahead a little bit. And as that year approached and COVID hadn't quite waned and the concert scene hadn't quite come back, they said, let's give it a little bit longer. Let's shoot for 2022, and we'll just do it then. We think it'll be better by then. And it was. Mm-hmm. And we returned to the stripped down tour, the No Frills, it had some kind of the return of the Vanity tour, I don't know, there was some name for it, and but we just kind of called it the No Frills tour. And again, stripped down, no videos, no orchestras and stuff like that. And we're playing kind of smaller venues, theaters, so 15, 18, 2,200 kind of places, and again, a different set list every night. And we changed out some of the originals that we were doing. We narrowed it down a little bit. We did not, however, learn 77 new songs or 122 or whatever it was. Oh, I should add that the tour was 27 weeks. So that's 6 months and a week.
That's half a year, yeah.
No break.
Wow.
Well, we get 2 nights off a week.
Of course.
But no, you're going to sit here for a week or we're going to fly you home for 2 weeks. It was a 27-week tour, and we had
bang it out. Yeah.
And we were not about to learn. I think it was 122 shows or something. We were not about to learn 122 songs. So we took from our pool of covers that we had done before and got them down to about 35. We added a few new ones, and we rotated those a little bit. And if we played the same metro area again, as we often did, and we knew there would be some of the same fans there, we made sure we didn't play the same cover song that we had played the last time we played there. In fact, I think they would make the set list significantly different as well. But we were out. That was a very successful tour. Except COVID was still a thing. COVID was still coming back, and it was strong enough that we on the tour had COVID protocols, which is, one, you will test after the show every night. If we're not playing that night, you will come to the tour manager's hotel room and test. We tested 7 days a week. Crew, everybody.
Oh boy.
And which was fine.
I said everybody was doing that.
Nobody wants to catch COVID, and you didn't know. And even though there was a certain amount of vaccines that were out at a point, you didn't want to catch it regardless, and you didn't know if you were vaccinated, and you caught it, which still could happen, if the vaccine would actually keep you from having any problems with it. You might still get some pretty bad symptoms. So we were asked to not go into restaurants, to wear a mask all the time, if you're around other people. If you're on the bus with the rest of the band, there's only so much you can do, but if you're around other people, wear masks. We're going to require people to show a negative test before they come into the venue. I forgot if they were trying to make them wear masks while in the venue. People who had signed up for Al's VIP after show thing, and there were 100 to 150 of them a night who had paid extra for preferential seating and then a chance to say hi to Al. I said, well, we're still going to do that, but you're not shaking hands with Al, and you're going to wear a mask in there. And when you get together next to Al to take a picture, there's a sheet in between you, a celluloid sheet, so there's not any germs going back and forth, and you take your mask down then. But other than that, Well, with all the care and the protocols and all of that stuff, Al was the first to catch COVID.
I was going to say, probably, yeah.
Of course, because germs, go around the sheet.
Yeah, germs
and they go
don't care.
over the sheet,
Yeah.
and they're in the room when people take their mask off. And it's not possible to not catch it, as we all learned on that tour. Jim West was, so Al was down we missed 4 shows.
Ooh.
So unfortunately, this was only 3 weeks into the tour, so we hadn't been out so long that we needed a week off. So we got our week off about 3 weeks in, and we were in Canton, Ohio, which is not the worst place to sit. I would put on my mask, go out, and I'd go up to the market and buy something that I could cook in the microwave in the hotel room, because I didn't go into the restaurants. Anyway, he was the first to catch it, got back in shape pretty good. We had, as part of our protocol, we were all asked, Al being the exception, to line up a sub to come do our part in case we caught COVID and did not feel well enough to play. So Jim was on guitar, was next, And he felt well enough to play, and they said, okay, you will be separated. You won't travel in the bus with the guys because you're in an enclosed area, that are all going to become exposed. You'll travel in a car, either rent a car, or depending when we travel, we'll get you a car so you can get some sleep overnight, or whatever it is. You travel separately, you eat separately, you will be in a separate room, or we're going to erect a tent or whatever away from this. You'll be off stage, and we'll just run everything from there, and you'll do the show from there. And which was actually pretty funny because we still had a stool and a mic set up where he sits, and Al would call out guitar solo, and the light would go on where Jim is supposed to, and you'd hear this like solo coming out, and nobody there. And Al would explain, well, Jim tested positive, so he's off stage somewhere, or he's in Hawaii, probably
phoning it in,
probably just wearing his shorts or something.
Yeah.
And then Jim had a mic in the room, so he could like talk back and sing and stuff like that. Anyway, we did that for several shows. And you got through that, and it worked, and that was fine, until the crew and the tour manager realized, that's all well and good to separate Jim from the rest of the guys in the band, but now the crew is dealing with him and is exposed to him, and that's not going to help. And that we don't all have subs who can just walk in and do what they do.
Right.
Some of our crew people do 2 and 3 different jobs that would happen on a normal tour, and they've been with us for a long. You can't have a show come to a halt because a crew member got sick because he was trying to help a guy that shouldn't have been on stage, off stage in the first place, who was tested positive. Anyway, so the protocol changed, and then it's like, you guys have your subs lined up, right? Because if you get COVID, if you test positive, doesn't matter how good you feel, or how far away or how many masks you wear, you will not be around any of us. Mm-hmm. And the next to catch it was Ruben, the keyboard player. And we were in Regina, Canada, and he tested positive. This was on a night off. He tested positive, and Al and I that night got together and said, and he tried to reach his subs. He had 2 guys lined up, and one of them had taken another gig and was off touring or doing something. And the guy who was available, again, we're in Canada, something was up with his passport, and he could not get into Canada. He couldn't. I mean, if this had been any other time in the States, he would have just flown out. It would have been fine. And so we weren't about to cancel a show, or we were trying to not cancel a show. And Al and I sat down together with our masks on and looked at all of the songs in the list of songs that we called, from on that tour. The Ill-Advised Vanity Tour was what it was. This was the return of the Ill-Advised Vanity Tour. And it's like, what songs, because I think he thinks I paid more attention to musically what's going on. He just sings when he hears music. But I think he knew that I knew better even than sitting down Ruben or talking to him on the phone and saying, what songs could we do without you? He asked me, I went down, I said, we can do most of these songs without Ruben. I mean, some of them are very keyboard-centric, piano-centric even, and you're not going to be able to do it, and it's not, So those are off the list until Ruben comes back. We got these 24, 25 songs that would be just fine.
Yeah,
there were a couple of things where Ruben did a specific effect. I said, I've got all of those. I'll put them on my pad. I know I can hit them. Don't worry. That's, we don't not do that song because of one sample. Mm-hmm. I'll do it. So we did the next 4 shows without Ruben, just the 4 of us. Moved my riser to the center like it used to be when it was just 4 of us on tour back in the early 80s. And we did those 4 shows, and it was just, and once he tested negative, he came out, I think he missed 4 shows. And I think he was a little mortified that we actually went on and did the shows without him. I think he believed that, maybe the tour would come to a halt and we'd realize how important he was. And he is important. Everyone's important. Of course. But there's only one guy for whom the show does not go on, and that's Al.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was early July. Several more weeks go by. I catch COVID. Again, no idea. I was extremely careful. I did not go into restaurants. I wear a mask if I had to go into a store. I didn't see people after a show. I didn't see guests. I didn't hang with fans. I didn't do any of that stuff. It happens.
You walk around licking doorknobs, it'll happen. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. See, that was not on the list of the protocols.
I'm telling you, man.
They said, wearing your mask, don't go into.
They didn't say don't lick doorknobs.
If they had put don't lick doorknobs, that could have saved. That might have saved Al.
I'll tell you.
Because the door, on these tours. So we don't have groupies. We have doorknobs. So I catch it. So I had, and not that anything I do, it's not, we weren't playing to tracks. I mean, it's just coming in and playing songs. And I had already lined up, and I talked to a lot of people, a lot of some pretty cool. I was going to talk to Greg Bissonette, who's been Ringo's drummer for many years.
Sure.
I pretty much knew he'd be on the road. I had to talk to people that were not likely to be on tour. And not that they needed to come out and do 3 months with us, but that they would need to drop what they were doing and come out and maybe do a week. You know, we didn't know.
So Jim Keltner was not an option.
Keltner was not. No, you know, I emailed Bunny Carlos. He's not
now that
touring.
would have been amusing, actually.
And he's seen us play.
Yeah.
And in fact, Bunny said after one show, he says, I couldn't do what you do. Because he knows I was, yeah, of course he can. But that was a very nice thing for him. No. He has, he says, I wouldn't do what you do.
Oh, okay.
I think he has a much higher sense of shame than I do. At any rate, but I can't, because I knew he could come out and he would love to just, just to play.
Sure.
You know? And he says, I appreciate that. My touring days are over, but thank you.
I think him and Rick Nielsen would be an interesting addition to the band for a gig or two.
Well, if we, but I never got a chance to learn who the other subs were because nobody else caught it during the rest of that tour. But I had in the end, I had Vatos from Oingo Boingo was lined up because I knew he,
there's a player.
I picked my subs, and because the drums are configured a certain way, and I'm right-handed, that it had to be a right-handed person, roughly my size, so they didn't have to make too many adjustments and make their gig traumatic, and so that I didn't have to readjust it when I came back. If they were left-handed, that would change everyone's life. And they had to, they had to be obviously a good drummer. I mean, that's a given. Didn't matter if they sang or not because my vocal duties are minimal. But
I was just thinking of Wreak Havoc, but he's lefty.
Well, does he play acoustic drums? I don't know.
Actually, I don't know if he does or not. I know he.
I think for what they were going to pay him, I think they would have. But I talked to Dusty Watson. I talked to John Cowsill. I talked to Mario Caleri from Ozo Motley and the Wallflowers.
Yeah, you made the rounds.
Yeah, John Ferraro.
Did you hit up Russ Kunkel?
Did not talk to Russ.
Although Russ was probably on the road with everybody too at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, as he.
Yeah.
Russ could have. I mean, all these guys could drum circles around me. I mean, it's not even.
It's not about technical ability though, and as we know, it never is.
No. It's got to. They're not there to make the gig theirs. They're there to make it Al's.
Yeah, exactly. Do you fit the groove?
So I had this guy Christopher Alice was Mike Nesmith's drummer right up till the end. Great local player. Also didn't hurt that some of these guys are Ludwig artists, so when they're saying sit behind the kids at Ludwig. But in the end, and in the beginning actually, before we started the tour, I had one guy in particular lined up, and I knew he wasn't likely to be going on the road. I knew he could walk away from his house on no notice. His wife was there to take care of the animals. He didn't have a day job, so he didn't have to. There was no prep. In order to, we need you to come out as soon as you can, he could do it. And I made sure the four guys on my list all had recordings of what was going on the road. If we massaged something or whatever, I would make sure, or if we added a song, that they didn't know about, I made sure they got a recording of that. They had charts of everything that needed a chart. I told them what cover songs were happening. I could give them set lists when it came time, because we had the entire year done. Before we started the tour, he had done 27 weeks worth of shows. So we're in Ashland, Kentucky, of all places, and we do a show. And it's funny because that afternoon, I think it was a Monday, that afternoon, I was just feeling I was my nose was running a lot, and it doesn't run, and I don't really have allergies. And it just felt really weird, and I felt okay, but I just always had to have like a Kleenex with me. And I didn't understand what was happening. I thought, see, Ruben hasn't been sick in a while. Nobody's been sick in a while. I don't know why I would, if this is a COVID thing or not, but I don't know why I would I'm going to call Nick and just sort of touch base with him. And I said, I don't know if anything's going on. We won't be testing till after tonight's show, but I said, in case, I just feel funny today.
Stand ready. Yeah.
Are you still standing by to stand by? He says, yeah, I hope you're okay, but I can do it. Let me know. And we tested after the show, positive, tested again, positive again. So first thing, I get separated into a different room, and told the tour manager I'm going to call Nick. It's like 10:30 at night, but he's in the same time zone, so it was okay. And I said, I tested positive. There's a show tomorrow. Can you come out? And he says, yeah. I said, okay, I'm going to give Melissa's the tour manager. I'm going to give her your number. She's going to get a flight for you. talk to you about all that, and then give you the details and tell you, et cetera. And we hadn't discussed salary or anything like that because there was sort of no point in doing it. But I had told him, I said, this is what you should be making. This is your per diem, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think I also sent him the next 5 or 6 set lists just so he would sort of know. But he had done his homework. He had rehearsed and worked on that stuff even before the tour started. And I sort of told him, I told all the guys, I said, I don't see this being an issue, so please don't put any work. If something happens, you'll have a day or 2 or 3 or whatever to put it together. But
guy was obviously a pro.
That was, well, definitely. And that's why he was number 1 on my list. And I'd known all these guys for years and seen them play, of course, and knew they were capable and wouldn't take the songs in a direction they didn't go. So there were a lot of considerations. I made sure these guys were all politically aligned with us, mostly Nazis. And not Nazis, what's the Nazis? And that's not true. But all good guys.
Sure.
But Nick was always at the top of my list, and I'm very pleased he was able to come on. And he's lined up for the next tour, which is a year plus away, which, to tell you how well Al plans ahead, I had a set list for that tour 8 months ago for the tour that was going to happen 2 years from then.
Wow.
That's how, anyway. But that was our COVID tour. Steve on bass managed to evade COVID during the tour, but managed to catch it later, after we'd gotten home.
Perfect.
Nobody
it
got
all goes
really,
around and is even,
Nobody got really, really sick. And I should add that Ashland, Kentucky, and the hotel I was in, was not the worst place to be. Because again, still at that point, especially at that point, not going into restaurants, I would go down and with my mask on, go to the front desk of the restaurant downstairs and order something to go. They had like a half-a-pound hamburger with a nice side of spinach or mashed potatoes or whatever for $10. And it was really good. So I didn't go through my per diem on that. I got paid sick pay for the week off. Nick got paid. Everyone got flown where they needed to be. Anyway, my symptoms were not that bad. I was very fatigued for a couple of days. I would rather have not caught COVID.
Of course.
But I caught it, got through it. It was fine. I've stayed and will stay current with the vaccines. And I attribute the fact that I wasn't really down with it for very long to the fact that I was vaccinated.
Yes.
But I also know, we also well know, that a vaccine doesn't prevent you from catching it. It just prevents it from being
exactly. It keeps the symptoms.
It keeps the symptoms
at
at a minimum.
Yes.
And that's certainly worth a free shot.
Yep.
It's free. I'm old. It's free.
Exactly. So I want to zoom out a little bit on something here. Because I also I'm trying to bear in mind how long we go with this, because the longer it is, the less chance people get to the end of it and stuff like that.
Oh, I hope we don't have an end.
We have short attention span theater, but I want to zoom out a little bit and ask you about. Let's go backwards a little bit. As things started becoming more real, shall we say, right? I mean, you guys met, there was no chance that, you had no idea. You were a bunch of musicians, right? As things began to take off, it seems to me that because of the videos, because of the MTV situation, because of Dr. Demento, you guys didn't have a gradual peak. You sort of did this curve where all of a sudden, boom, you're in the pro sphere.
And there were a few occasions like that.
Was that, how did that impact you both professionally and personally?
Well, personally, I thought it was great. I got to do more. I mean, professionally, it led to more exposure that benefited the band and the members of the band, in terms of, say, product endorsements, in terms of some of my connections to other players.
Did it blindside you, though?
A downside?
No. Did it blindside you?
Oh, blindside?
Yeah. Because I think, things change very quickly in terms of the way people treat you. And I wonder if that was if that was a factor for you at all.
I don't think any of the players. Al certainly. I mean, there's one thing to remember. The band is Weird Al Yancovic.
Right. Of
We're
course.
just
of course.
the backup band.
Right.
It happens to have been
your drum guy.
the same guys all forever, as far as the public is concerned.
But interpersonal relationships can also change during that time. So.
I got within the band.
Or even generally speaking, other people start treating you differently.
Not so much. No, okay. not so much. I mean, and none of this went to anybody's head. I mean, where that would create any kind of a weird dynamic with anyone. We grew into it, and knowing that that it might not be permanent, and how cool, we're going to be one hit wonder. Oh, I guess we're a 2-hit wonder. Oh, now we're a 3-hit platinum wonder. Oh,
Damn,
gee,
now it's 40 years.
Now
Yeah.
we're like, now Al's got his own like blocks on MTV where he's like created this content for them. Oh, now we're making a movie. Oh, now there's a book, with all of our photos in it. Oh, now here a bunch of gold and platinum records start showing up.
So the opportunities just arose and you kind of took them in stride, basically.
Kind of. I don't know that I went out and exploited my position, because I'm always a little understated and a little lower key, and I'm well aware of what my value might be or might not be. So I don't really push it. I know that, like I got online, for example, I started with the internet in 1993. It was fairly well before most people did.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It was certainly well before any other well-known drummers did.
It was Usenet back then, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, it was bulletin boards and stuff, and really websites were in their infancy.
Oh, I was a sysop on a CompuServe bulletin board for MIDI back then.
Oh, wow. So I got in very early with exposing, and there was I didn't pretend to not ever be Al's drummer. I didn't use other fake names. I mean,
Right.
I was Bermuda Schwartz or Bermuda or whatever. And so I had good exposure to, and gradually began to meet and expose and chat with other drummers and other musicians, as well as Al fans. I was certainly the first within the band to go online. Within a few years, and some of our more technically inclined fans had created web pages for Al. And I thought, I've got like zillions of photos and all sorts of, I should do a web page. So I got myself a book, How to Create HTML, and read it over on a plane flight or two, going to and from shows in Oregon. Got home and created my first web page from scratch in Notepad. I'm a Windows guy, and bracket HTML, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, yeah.
And made the Bermuda files, meaning all of my stuff on Al. I think at that point I had gotten a scanner, so I was able to scan photos, and I had.
Man, you were cutting edge, man.
Well, more or less, except for the host. I forgot who the host was, but it was. Oh, it was Loop.com. I think was the very first host. They were bought by Earthlink later, but Loop.com. It was Bermuda@Loop.com was my email address, and I think they had like 100K of web space, which was, well, nowadays you could put a couple of photos, maybe small ones.
Yeah.
Anyway, but most of what I had was text, and I never exceeded. But I put that on there, and that sort of became Al's official site, because it was done by an official family member of the Al Project, who was the archivist, and who you knew if he put something or said something or put a photo up, that was like really inside information.
Yeah.
And so much so that when the next album came out, this was 95, and the next album came out in 96, and we did not have WeirdAl.com yet. I don't know if I was really savvy to it or it hadn't occurred to me, but that was a year away still. It still shows, loop.com/Bermuda/index.html.
I will love it.
I didn't even know how to just make a page that would just show up, without having to say index at the time. I was still fairly new at that. But anyway, it said that in the liner notes, and when they did a reissue of the liner notes and all of that stuff in 2017 for a box set, a really elaborate box set, it still had that in there. They didn't change it, and I proofread the book. I was kind of in charge of the entire book, because most of the photos in the book are from me. I sat down with some guys from Sony Legacy over a couple of weekends, and we poured through all of my stuff.
Wow.
Everything. Opened up boxes of things, looked at all the T-shirts. I mean, just really did a number. And so that's kind of my book. When that book for art design got a Grammy, Al's acceptance speech, he comes up there and he says, "I want to thank my drummer John Bermuda Schwartz because of the book that was in there." Anyway, so that was my foray into web stuff, and I became a legitimate web designer. I've still got a license for Bermuda Schwartz web design. Anyway, in doing that stuff early on, I forgot where I was going with about the exposure and me exploiting my exposure. I sort of had it, and still have a really good sense of where I matter and where I don't, And sometimes I'm a little, if I'm not sure, I always err on the side of nobody cares, that I am this or did this or,
Yeah,
or have
you seem to be
achieved this or
somewhat
whatever.
self-deprecating.
And,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I just try to be more reserved. And if there's something good to be said, the other person will say it. And
Yep.
it's like, well, that's really nice to be,
Yes.
that's very kind to feel in that way. I mean, a lot of people, and it depends on the other person too. I mean, there's a lot of drummers think that well, for example, if I don't talk about what my endorsements entail as far as consideration, and there's a reason for that. I mean, one I'm kind of discreet, and it's kind of nobody's business. But there's sort of a deeper reason, and that's I don't want anyone to think weird of it. Like there's going to be some people, if I say, you know what, I pay for they give me discount, but I pay for these things. They're going to say, you shouldn't be paying. You're the great Bermuda. You should be, what they're charging you. Everybody knows who you. Or it's like, yeah, they give me all that stuff for free. Free? Who the hell are you to get stuff? Yeah. What are you, Neil Peart? He gets more stuff than you, and he's dead.
I did artist relations for Shure microphones in Europe for most of the 90s, and so I can understand that. I can relate to it, and I was the first one to always preach about what you can do, what you can't do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. It's a matter of not just discretion, but it's a matter of just good taste, and I mean, these are agreements between yourself and a company.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I very early on, and in being with it, I was just online all the time. I had, because nobody was doing it, companies and other artists were not talking about endorsements. And something had come up in one of the drum forums. Oh, Trey Cool from Green Day he was a Slingerland artist at the time. He says he gets a free kit every night and kicks it off the stage and trashes it, and they set it on fire or he stomps on it or something. And
How original.
And I said, and I knew the status of Slingerland. First off, nobody should do that, but nobody would do that, particularly that era of Slingerland in the late 90s. So I thought, I'm with all of the companies that I deal with, and I had been doing endorsing stuff since '84 at that point. I said, I'm friends and have a lot of inside information and insights, and have been told a lot of things, about what these artist relations guys would like musicians out there to know before they come pester them for free gear.
Yep.
Oh, he must get free gear. I want free gear. I'm a really good drummer.
Yep.
So you should give me free gear. And nobody, companies weren't talking about that. There weren't any artists online. And I wrote a whole FAQ about it, a frequently asked question.
Yep.
And I posted it in late '97. And companies,
I saw that,
including the companies that I dealt with my permission, adopted that as because they didn't have that. They were online, but nobody was talking about that. Now everybody finally is talking about it.
Well, we created that at Shure in like the late 90s too. We created an artist relations sort of policy. But again, a lot of that had to do with also from the corporate side. There's always been this perception of, I'm endorsed by this brand.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're endorsing the brand. You're endorsing their product.
That's in my FAQ.
Exactly.
Drives me nuts.
Yeah. Let me wrap with something here that I think would sort of bring us full circle, because you have now been not only in this industry for decades, but you've been involved in a lot of, I would say, forward-thinking aspects of this industry, from the internet to graphics and understanding marketing and stuff like that. You've really, you've kept up, shall we say. 15-year-old you wanting to break into the industry in this day and age, completely different landscape, music is consumed differently, created differently. What advice would you give them?
I think first and foremost, they have to love what they do. It's most important and will always serve them if they actually like playing the instrument or programming, sequence or whatever. They have to enjoy that. And that way they're never going to have a problem with not making it or making it and getting a big, they're going to always do what they want to do. And that's first and foremost. And I like playing drums. I'm grateful, and I got lucky, and it's unusual, but it's been very cool that I've been able to enjoy this career with Al all these years. And it was a chance meeting, but it's not like I haven't had to work to keep up with his agenda, because I have no qualms that Al would replace me in the studio in a minute if he thought it would compromise his songs by me doing it, by me not rising to his agenda. So, I mean, it's not like I got lucky, and I've been writing on his. I had to keep up. I've had to work. I've had to invest. I've had to think, do a lot of things. As far as if they want to say a career in music, that's hard to say. You know, I don't know if younger players, if there's really a live performance ethic so much. I mean, for some, certainly. I mean, back in the day, that's what you did. There wasn't an alternative.
Right.
You couldn't make music for which you didn't also have to go out and play it live for somebody. There was no point. You didn't just create things that got played in music or
Right.
that people danced to in clubs with the guy pretending to mix it when
No,
instead he's
even
just
if you got a
pushing
record
a
deal, you went out to support that.
yeah. And that's not the same thing. Record deals now, if you can get one, involve, well, you will have to go out and play live, and we get a cut of that. If you're selling a T-shirt, we get 10% of that. It's
Well, if you even want one.
the 360 deal,
Yeah.
anymore.
But even if you want one, I mean, most younger people these days don't even see the merit to it, which I can understand.
I don't know. Not having any teenage members in my even extended family who are trying to break into the business, I just don't know what the answer is. And I think whatever it is undoubtedly different than the way we did or the way it just happened, right place, right time thing. I mean, that's always going to be being in the right place at the right time or meeting the right person. You just don't know when that's going to be. You can't create it. You can
No,
only
you can't.
network so much to put yourself and put your name in front of all the right people, and you don't know if and when it will ever pay off.
And you also, I think you can make use of preparing yourself for those opportunities, being good at what you do. The old saying, luck favors the prepared, you being ready for those opportunities when they arise. I think that hasn't changed.
Well, you have to recognize that. And legend has it, everyone says that I said this after we did Another One Rides the Bus on the air. I guess at the commercial break, I said, Al, you should have a band. I'll be your drummer. And which sounds like something I would have said, but not coming from anywhere. I don't know why I said that. I don't know that we would have otherwise exchanged phone numbers. That was just something that it was the right place at the right time, and I said whatever I said was the right thing, and it was very serendipitous that he was even there that night. I could have just been there, done my interview, and gone home, and that would have been the end of it, and I would probably still have my little card that says I was there that night, but nobody would care. And now people are like, wow, that's really cool. That's the night you met Al. That's very cool.
Well, serendipity is pretty much what drives all our careers, isn't it?
To a large extent, you can only create your situation so much. You can make the music and hope that people enjoy it. Or you can make it and enjoy it for yourself and not much care if you're of the right temperament, not really care if you make it to a certain point. There's one guy I know who's such an artist, and I'm going to use that term, sarcastically for this guy, that he told me, and he was serious. He was, if he puts out his own CDs. If people started buying my CDs, that means I will have sold out. That's pretty severe.
He
said that. He
wow.
said those words, and it's like, I know where you're such an artist. You're such an artist that that's how you want it to be. You want to put stuff out there, and it's so personal that you don't want anybody to like it, because then you're commercial. If people like it, then you're mainstream anymore. You're not an artist, which is not true. But he had that in his head, and it's like, and he got what he wanted. Nobody buys his CDs. It's like, I'm an artist, woohoo!
All right. Whatever floats your boat, I guess, right?
Yeah. You just have to have the right temperament for whatever comes your way. I don't think you can let this is a case of failure having gone to his head. You can't let success go to your head, and you can't let failure go to your head. You just have to do it. You have to enjoy doing what you're doing. And if you enjoy that, you're okay. And as long as you don't rely, I mean, sometimes you go get a day job. I did. I worked a day job I've worked day jobs most of my first half of my life, including the first 14 years I was with Al. I worked for a company, and they were very kind, and this would never happen again, I'm sure. They let me go on the road and then come back. 3
Phone
weeks
company,
here.
yeah. I worked for the phone company. They
weeks
let me
there.
do that too.
And
but
that would never happen now.
Never. That's
But
true.
but that's because when I was at the job, I did a great job. I wasn't, talking about drums, and I did that job. Just like when I was on the road, I wasn't, actually I was checking in with the company, because I wasn't on payroll still, but I was just on a leave. So I had my beeper, And I had a 1-800 dial-in phone number that I could reach people or go in and then get an outward line so I didn't have to pay for the phone call. And I kept up with the gardeners and the lawnmowers and the whole. That's undoubtedly coming through. But at any rate, and I had a day job concurrent with, when we got gold records, I had them shipped to the office. When I would have product shipped to me from one of the companies, cymbals, drums, they were shipped to my office. Everybody knew I had a day job, and I was somewhat envied for it. A lot of musicians that I worked with here in town would have loved to have been in my shoes, because it was a paycheck year round. I had it going both ways. And I was very respectful of that. I did not exploit that. I mean, I talked about it. You couldn't not talk about the fact that, are you free this week? No, you're not on the road, are you? I said, well, I work Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturday. It's what I do. But the bands I was working with, they weren't rehearsing at noon on a Tuesday.
Right.
We would
Tuesday night.
Yeah, I stayed in all my bands. I rehearsed with the bands at night. I played with the bands at night, and worked on the weekends. And only when it was time to really, if I had to be in the studio, I would take the day off, stuff like that. But it was only when I had an actual tour book that I said, you know what, I need a 4-week leave of absence.
Yep.
And they would have someone do my job, and I would check in with them daily. And so I was very conscientious about it. But I didn't have a problem having a day job, even though I had gold records on the wall.
Yeah. Well,
it was like, I just, now that doesn't help that I was in debt, credit card debt, and needed to make money, but I didn't have any artistic or personal or issue with making money and doing what I needed to do, so I wasn't a poor musician. Starving for your art is highly overrated.
I agree.
And I never did that. I never wanted to do it. I didn't want to find out what that meant. I said, I have bills to pay. I have food to eat. I have gas to put in my old car. Eventually it's like, no, gas is, $4.50 a gallon. I'll put it in my new car. And, it's okay. I just won't rev the engine too much.
Well, it seems like you've defined success for yourself just fine.
I feel successful, and that's because I get paid to do what I want to do, what I enjoy doing, and that's success. And I'm very proud of that, and I try not to forget, that it's a very fine line to having not been able to get there, or being able to hang on to it. There will be a point, not too soon it doesn't look like, but there's going to be a point where people stop coming to see Al.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe not in any of our lifetimes, but when he's dead and gone, there'll be fewer people coming to see him. We're probably going to play clubs again at that point. But
so this is a weekend at Bernie's kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Or weekend at Burmese, if I'm the surviving member of the band.
Man.
But it's I'm very grateful and thankful and that I get to do what I always wanted to do, which was I wanted to be a professional drummer, and I
think you handled it.
Had that right moment at the right time, and I said the right thing, and I stuck with it, and I grew as I was required to grow and learned, and therefore I am still here. So very, very happy about that, and very thankful to Al, and very thankful to Al's fans. Al couldn't do what he does without the fans.
Exactly.
And they have been great. Al's been very good to us, and it's a good life, and I don't see the end in sight.
That's fantastic.
Which is nice.
John Schwartz, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.